Next guy on the list, Ryan, is one of my favorite players, and that's Braylon
Mm-hmm.
James.
Yep.
I love this kid. I mean, he's a really good football player. And the thing I love about him is this is my coaching bias coming out. I love kids with that super toolsy kids that don't really know what they're doing. Like that's as a coach, my favorite kind of kid because I don't have to break a lot of bad habits from him. I'm teaching him he's going to be just like a newbie, right? I get to teach him all the cool things I want to teach him. And that's Braylon James, a super raw player. I've said this in the past. He's kind of like that kid that when we started this trend, 15, 20 years ago, where high school football coaches started recruiting off the the basketball team to come out and play. That's Braylon James, and he's that type of player that you look for. That 6'3", springy. That's the word you used last time we talked about him. Springy, and a guy with really impressive long speed. So, but when you have a guy that's raw, like, we've hammered the recruiting services for some of their rankings. A kid this raw, I'm more sympathetic to some of the people that have him ranked a little bit lower. I think he's a top 100 recruit. Like, to me, surefire top 100 recruit, no question about it. But I'm not going to crush 247 Sports. I think 266. I think 267 is way too low. But even then, I'm not going to crush him because he is a really raw kid and his production wasn't elite last year. But the tools are outstanding. So this is one of those kids, Ryan, that I am somewhat more understanding of why the recruiting services have such a bigger gap on him. Even though I tend to agree with ESPN and Rivals much more so than the others, this is one I'm not going to crush him for because I understand it because he is super raw. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, he's a top 100 guy for me as well. I would say he's probably 75 to 100 because I do think there is rawness to his game. The word that comes to my mind when I think Braylon James is explosive, absolutely explosive. And I know we talked a little bit about it. You saw obviously, and I know we'll talk about it, here in a second. You see, I think, a little more deep speed than I do, but what I think we both agree on is that this kid out of his stance is explosive. He gets on top of dudes quickly. So I mean, this is a big time talent, but I do agree that it is acceptable if you're a little lower on him just because there is a little more of a projection. Like, I agree with you. Yeah. I think on 3 is still a little ridiculous though, to be honest. Like 267 is just like, I mean, you watch that kid's film and you were like, that's a 267th best athlete in the country. Like I don't understand that one, but
yeah, it's a little too low. It's a little too low, but again, it's just, I get it. I don't agree with it. I think the guy that does so what I'm told is there's only one guy that does the rankings. Like one guy does all the evaluations, does the rankings. And I don't think that's necessarily the way to go for a national service. I'm going to release a top 100 at some point in time this summer. And it's going to be mine. And I'm going to say, look, this is mine. It's going to be my bias. I'll see if Ryan's willing to kind of get in on it with me and we can kind of do a group project on it. But the point is it's fewer people. So if we have a bias towards a kid, then it's going to have a greater impact. But that's why the more people, the better being involved in it. Because if one guy has a kid like at 267, but everybody else like, hey, this is a top 75 kid, then you average those out and he's 128, like 247 Sports has. Which is more, that's the more reasonable being lower on him than you should be ranking, in my opinion. But that's the unique thing. And so when we watch Braylon James, what you're going to see from him as we go through this conversation is you're going to see a kid that is we just watched Cardinal Tate, who is super advanced, great feel for the game. Now we're going to watch a kid that's like, he's a kid that you're going to have to teach how to play. But you always take a kid like this. And I love the fact that the first 2 kids that we're going to look at are 6'2" plus, bigger guys, and both of them, one of their first highlights is them returning a kick.
Tells you a lot. Tells you a lot. Yep.
So you see really long legs, which you can see. He's listed between 6'2" and 6'4". Brian Smith said he's closer to like 6'3". He had a chance to meet him down in I think it was Texas this past week at a 7-on-7, I believe is what it was. But really, really long strider. It takes him a while to kind of get that speed up sometimes. And for me, this is where you see that burst, like right there. That's where you say, oh, okay. But the thing for me is when you have a kid who's really raw technically, he's going to be a slow starter. Unsound kids fundamentally are going to be naturally slower on their initial movements. And so you've got to try to find some situations where you say, oh, okay, that's what I'm looking for, right? And he's a pretty skinny kid already, but he's got a frame that's going to really fill out. Them pads look loose on him. You
Oh
got to
man,
get some new pads.
he's gonna be a good 6'3", 215 before he blinks his
Yeah.
eyes, man. He is gonna be
Oh
a
yeah.
big kid. He's gonna be a really big kid.
This is where you can see the speed. He is the outside guy in this formation. In this trips, he's at the very top. Look at this speed. Look at him chew up this ground right here. I wish they'd stop doing that, but you really see that burst. He just runs past those dudes. That's really impressive.
Mm-hmm.
His quarterback's not the most accurate guy in the world either.
Sure isn't.
And that kind of hurt his production too. But I love the long speed from this young man. He is really toolsy. Really toolsy. You look at that length.
Whew.
Just be able to snatch that ball out of the air with ease.
Look how quickly he elevates too.
Yes.
Oh man.
Yep.
Oh.
Yep. Love it. Absolutely love it.
And
then
this
watch him
kid's
hit the ground.
A highlight waiting to happen. A highlight waiting to happen, this young man.
And then watch him, Ryan, when he hits the ground, immediately get into running form. Like, that's great. That's when we talk about balance, that's balance. Because, at my age now, if I were to go out there and catch a football and when I land, I'm stumbling for a few steps, right? Because my balance is terrible. And even with top players, if they don't have great balance, they're going to kind of stumble and need to gather their feet. He hits that thing and he hits the ground running. I mean, literally hits the ground running. Like, shows exactly what that phrase is. And that's great balance. And a lot of times with taller kids, they sometimes don't have great balance on the football field because they can tend to be kind of longer striders. This kid has that. Now, this is where you see the rawness, Ryan. We talk about what I say, accelerate through the look back. He does not. Watch this. So you can immediately see as soon as he turns around, his speed changes. And that's something he's going to have to work on, right? And again, that's one of those things that's not natural for a player, and it takes work. And that's why, I've said before in practice, I would say that constantly we would work on things, accelerate through the look back, and that's part of that those raw aspects he's going to have to prove upon as a player. But this kid's got great body control, great focus. And again, this isn't great technique. I want to see him, he's got to get further away from the sideline. He's got to stack this guy a little bit better. But, man, that body control, that leaping ability is really impressive.
And I know we said – and I think we both agree that Cornell Tate is a long, athletic kid. But this kid, when we're talking about length, I mean, unfortunately for him, the quarterback play, like you said, is not great. So there's some plays where you really do see how much extension he can make because he has to for some errant throws. But man, he is a long kid. Like I would guess that this kid is a 32, 33-inch arm type of kid at 6'3". Like he can get up into some impossible spots to make some grabs elevate.
And I think you're right. I think he's going to be a 210, 215 kind of kid. Like this, I'm talking about, he looks so lost right here, trying to manipulate this route. He's like, I'm not quite sure what to do. But he has no clue what he's doing. But he's just too good. He's just too good. He's too big. He's too long. He's too athletic. And there's nothing you can do about it. But this is where you say this is the raw part. Like, look, this isn't sharp. He's not quite sure what to do. But I love the fact that he just keeps working. I mean, that's the natural instinct I look for. So if I'm a receivers coach, I'm like, that's not pretty. But the thing I love about it that he's getting check marks in the positive frame for me is he never stops working. And he's able to go make a play. And now I'm going to be able to teach him how to do all that other stuff, right? But now it's like, okay, but does he have the desire to always work, to always hunt for the ball? That's what you see. This is another example of just great balance. Look at the stiff arm. And just that's really impressive. Plays with some swagger. I do like that. I love receivers and corners with attitude. I really do. I mean, they don't have to. This is a little bit clunky because, again, this is a technique thing, right? He's kind of using his upper body and his feet to break. But you can see the foot quickness because even though his technique stinks here, Ryan, he's not super choppy on this top end. Like, like a guy with
he's loose.
Yeah, because normally a guy that's kind of like this lean back and using his feet to stop is going to be like 4 or 5 steps into that top end, but he's not. I mean, he's turning on 2. And that's, again, another thing that shows me just really impressive foot quickness and agility and fluidity and all those type of things. Like, that's all there. It's just about, okay, now let's teach him how to play the game of football. But the kid's got – and he's a super smart kid too. And look, not every kid that's a 4.0 I've met kids who were 4.0 students, but just dumber than a brick when it came to any kind of common sense. You'll meet some guys that are great students, but don't know a thing about football, but
Mm-hmm.
but you can tell he's got a natural feel for the game on top of being a great student. But the reason I bring up the student part is because clearly he has the ability to consume knowledge, right? And embrace knowledge. And that's the thing I look for. And if he has that kind of hunger on the football field, he's going to learn. And
Yeah.
that's the thing that I like to see in a receiver. I like this toughness here too.
He is one of those guys, Brian, that he is the most frustrating person ever for a defense on high school level, because you would be in perfect position, right? You're just in perfect position, and he just runs a fade route where it's like he doesn't stack really that much on the fade, and it's all this or whatever, but he really does bring that basketball style where like you just throw it up to him and then he makes you look stupid, even though he didn't really do anything technically that was advanced. We just saw a play there that was like him just running a flat route, and you're in solid position, and he turns on the jets and he beats you for a long gain. And it's the most frustrating thing, because you can just see the raw athleticism, and he is a headache for a defense, because even when he's not technically perfect, he's just such a good athlete that he just makes you look stupid.
I want to show this play here real quick because this is another example of elite balance. And I'm not talking not necessarily like the breaking the tackle part. I like that, but this flip right here, like that right there, and then the acceleration that's a kid that's got really a loose body and great balance. And that's another play you talk about. You think you've got him beat,
Mm-hmm.
and nope, it's not
It's
going to
like a
happen.
it's like a 3rd and 5 backbreaker, man. You're like, oh, we got a
Mhm.
perfect position, and he got a first down. Nice. Okay.
Yeah, he's a special kid. Very, very talented kid. And again, like you can see this here, like he runs a good post curl from the standpoint of he runs a post curl,
Mm-hmm.
but you can tell he's not real sure how to kind of like you see him get a little choppy on that. He kind of has a feeling he knows I got to manipulate this guy, but he's a little choppy with it. And I don't think he understands like when you kind of get back vertical, stem that guy back up. But what you see here is really agile feet, like really loose feet that he can make sudden moves, even though his technique isn't really that good. But you also see a kid with a really good feel for the game, even though he doesn't necessarily have the advanced technique that a Cardinal Tate has. He
Yep.
has he has he has a really good feel. You see the body control again. I really like this kid. Really
Yep.
like this kid.
And even on that one, like you could see that he understands what leverage that he needs to attack. It's not
Hmm.
perfect, but at least you could see that he understands it. It's there.
Hmm. And this is not how you want it. Like he just kind of moves his feet in place. But even though he's kind of skinny, you see a strong kid because he should get ridden out of bounds here. I mean, really, this was a bad release. But he's a pretty strong kid. He's a pretty sturdy kid for as skinny as he is. But the ball skills there is really impressive. The field awareness to get his feet down. I uh I really like I really like this kid. I mean, I think you all are seeing, and you can see my bias coming out in that I love raw kids like this. I do, because this is like a
Mm-hmm.
coach's dream for me. Just a coach's dream for me. Big dog status. He's catching a slide route. Come on, y'all. Like,
I know it's got to be like a jump ball where he's mossing
yeah,
somebody at least,
so
right?
you caught
Something.
an uncovered slide route, buddy. I mean, come on now. Whoever's making this tape, like, chill out with all this. But this kid is really good. Good body control. Wish I could have seen that route. Was he calling timeout? So that must. So I don't know what's going on here. It looks like he's calling timeout, doesn't it?
Sure does.
So you got to think like this is a kid that gets tackled and he's looking to call timeout. That or he's like cramp. But I think he's calling a timeout there, which tells me this kid's got he's got a feel for the game, which I like. Again, really sloppy footwork here because he's still a young evolving kid, but look how level he comes though at the top end of that, Ryan. That's natural. Like I like that. That's one thing I criticize Cardinal for, right? He would drift a little bit on these kind of routes. He actually comes back downhill. He catches that ball closer to the line than where he made his initial break, which I like. Look at
Mm-hmm.
that looseness. Look at him just getting those feet up. Goodness gracious.
Yep. Yeah, man, he's a tough guy after the catch, man. Like you could see
Hmm.
the yak upside with him as well.
Yes, let's watch a couple more. Again, he's a little heavy-footed out of his stance because again, he's not in a good stance. You can see his lead foot right here, so it's going to be what is that? That looks like his left, right? You can see how
Yeah.
firmly planted in the ground it is, and so he's got to kind of plant it and then drive off of it. So it's a little bit heavy there. I mean, that can be fixed in a fall camp, and it just kind of he's a little sloppy out of his brakes, but does a nice job sinking on this top end though. But again, good feel. But he's telegraphing the heck out of this route. Like it's so. I mean, you can see how short and choppy his feet are. He's telegraphing the heck out of this. That can be corrected quickly. I don't care about that. It's the other things that I care more about, and those are the things he has, and he has in spades. So like he is that perfect like 4-star now but 5-star upside guy kind of guy. It's guys like him that are the reason that I came up with the 2 grading system. You know what I mean? Like, again, this is never how I would teach a guy to run this route. But look how sudden he is getting out of it. Like, that's terrible technique. A guy with this technique should take him 4 or 5 steps to get back downhill on this, Ryan. But it takes him 2. I mean, that's impressive.
He's loose and he's explosive, which, I mean, I think a lot of people, again, would just see the size, 6'3", and we already talked about he could be 210, 215. They would just kind of pencil him into the W. But, like, I think this kid could play the field because I think he's a route runner, man. Like, he's not just a one-trick pony type of player.
Yeah. With good coaching, he's going to be a good route. You're absolutely right. He's going to be a good route runner. He's going to have a far more nuanced game and versatile game than like a Miles Boykin, let's say. Yeah, even though his body type coming out of high school might be similar to Miles, he's got a completely different type of athleticism than Miles, which is going to allow him to be a completely different type of player than Miles. And like that's something that I'm really impressed by.
Like the effort as a blocker. Like the effort as a blocker too.
Love it. So that's Braylon James, everybody. Ryan, this is a guy that right now Notre Dame is in really good position for at this point in time. Like for me, he's a top 100 guy. Surefire top 100 guy. There's no question about it. But he's on the bottom end of the top 100 now because of the technical aspects we talked about, the need to build up his body. I mean, you can look at Carnell Tate and you can look at Braylon James, and Carnell is only about 10 pounds heavier than him, but it's just a different looking body. Like Carnell has a body that you're like, he could play right now, as a freshman, you know what I mean? And Braylon's got an evolving body. He's got a body still growing and his game is still growing, but man, the tools are really, really impressive, which is what makes him, he's not a must get for me because of what he is right now. He's a must get because of what I think he's going to be by the time he's a freshman and sophomore. In 2 years, this kid's going to be a beast, in my opinion. And I'm sitting there like kind of thinking like, thinking about the 2024 season when, Carnell, if he comes to Notre Dame and Tobias is a junior, Carnell's a sophomore, and Braylon's a sophomore, and Lorenzo's a senior, and you're like, you're not covered. You got Eli Raridan and Holden Staes and Gain Barong and Mitchell Evans, and you're like, how do you stop this team? And whoever your quarterback is, whether it's Tyler Buckner, unless he goes pro, and now you've got Dante Moore. I mean, that's where you start to kind of get a little fired up, but that's why it's important to get these guys. You can't miss on these kind of guys. You can't miss on Braylon James if you're Notre Dame. 4.0, 5.0 student, right? Wants to go. He's one of the few kids that's like is not even remotely close to like hiding where he wants to go in regards to away from home. He said to you, I want to go away from home. My sister went to Texas, and it's hard to really grow as a person when you're that close to home. Who says that as a 17-year-old?
Right.
You know what I mean?
He literally said, University of Texas, like you said, sister went there. It's right in my backyard. It's too close. It's too close for me. Like he wants to go away from home. He wants to evolve, which is
right. Because his family has kind of raised him to be a type of young man that's like, you see the world, experience new things. And he's just when you listen to him talk, you're like, this kid is really intelligent. Like this is a junior in high school that is so much further along in understanding, his place in the world than I was when I was a junior in high school. You know what I mean? And he's when you talk about Notre Dame kid, the traditional Notre Dame kid, this is not the kind of kid that Marcus Freeman says you got to convince that he's a Notre Dame kid. This kid already knows it.
Yeah, and I'll say this: when he talked to Brian Smith down at the 7-on-7 or whatever the event was, man, I listened to the interview and I'm just like, this kid sounds like he's in the NFL right now, like so well spoken. It was incredible. I'm just like, this kid has been raised really well, and he has a very clear understanding of like how his world's going to work. Like he is a really advanced and mature kid for
and just
his
giving
age.
himself outs on questions. He'll make a comment like, I'm thinking about late July and August, but but then he leaves himself an out, right? Like, it's a really savvy answer, and you look for things like that. But as a player, he's a must get for Notre Dame. Now he's going to be visiting this weekend. He's going to be coming up on Friday. This is the tricky part. Like right now, we believe that Notre Dame is his leader based on everything that we've heard. His high school coach has said that he thinks Notre Dame is the leader. And you could, in that interview, you could kind of tell that he was trying to be didn't want to give away too much of Barnes' leader, but you could just tell when he was talking about Notre Dame that there was something there. LSU made a really good move on him recently. Stanford's obviously pushing for him, but there's some issues at Stanford going on with their program and things like that. And Notre Dame's going to have to, in my opinion, this weekend's big because they've got to kind of knock it out of the park. In that this is your chance. He's coming with high expectations. And sometimes that's the more risky situation to be in when a kid is expecting you to knock it out of the park. And which means that's kind of raised the bar for what you need to do. So they've got to really crush it this weekend with him. And as he said, like, when I know, I'll know. Like that's kind of the out he left himself. Does that mean he's going to commit to Notre Dame after this weekend? We're not saying that. But what we are saying is this is an opportunity this weekend for Notre Dame to say, hey, look, we're going to put ourselves so far ahead that it's going to be impossible for anybody else to catch us. That's the opportunity they have this weekend, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, you said it perfectly. And Brian, it doesn't happen very often where a wide receiver from Texas is going to come to Notre Dame for the first time with them as his assumed leader. Like that does not happen, man. So like you need to close on that kid. You need to win that kid because you need to get back in Texas for one. You need to get an elite top 100 wide receiver recruit in this cycle. And if a kid is that headstrong about Notre Dame before he's even set foot on campus, like there's no reason not to grab him. There's no reason not to close on that one. That one for me, like if they lost that on Cornell, it would be a big deal and it would be very disappointing. But they can't lose out on Braylon James because just everything is just kind of stacking that this is Notre Dame's guy. High academic kid, need to get back in Texas, top 100 recruit, loves Notre Dame without even setting foot on campus. Like there's just not an excuse for not getting him. Like there's really not. They have to close on this one.